Welcome to Making a Band 101, my comprehensive guide to getting your musical project from your head and your plans to on the stage and in your community. This podcast is designed for individuals and groups that are either new to musical performance or re-energizing their project. All 7 episodes are chock full of industry tips, tricks, and secrets, and will give you the knowledge and the confidence to create success in a robust musical portfolio. I'm Drew Jones, and I can't wait to get you in my head and give you all the essential knowledge I've obtained in a 20-plus year music career with thousands of onstage hours and a performance portfolio. Without further ado, let's get into it. I walked into my favorite venue where I like to spend time with friends, listen to jams, check out new bands, just go on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon and hang out with the community. And at this point, the reputation of my band had sort of been popping off in the local community, and there was a couple of the old dogs that were sitting at the bar as I met up with my main buddy Mudge. And I remember these guys had noted or commented on, the perceived success of the band. And I said to them, yeah, you know what, we've been really lucky to not only have great, venue gigs and performance gigs, but we somehow tapped into the corporate market. And these 2 old dogs were like, oh, that's good for you boys. You must be making this amount of money. This is the amount of money we used to make, blah, 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 blah. And they're just throwing like huge numbers at me. The numbers were double what we were making at our corporate gigs. And I kind of sat there thinking like, what? I didn't get it. I was a bit confused. I was like, okay, well, how did you get it there? How did you get to making that amount of money? Years later, I'm walking back into the same venue and the story repeats. But this time our portfolio is even bigger. Like literally maybe has tripled in size in terms of like the scale of shows. We're playing for huge sporting communities, the NHL team, the football team, all these different things are happening for us, and these companies are picking us up to still do a lot of corporate stuff on the side. And our booking portfolio in terms of what the money was now had at least doubled, if not more. I'm sitting there with these old dogs at the bar again, and they're, talking to me about my situation like they know everything. And they're like, back in our day, we made X amount of money doing these gigs. And this time, I just had to prod a little bit. I had a bit of an answer for this, grotesque claim they had been making. I said, oh, how long did that last for? Oh, well, after the second year, the budget changed and, our buddy who worked there had moved on. Oh, no kidding. Okay, so, where else did you have those gigs? Oh, in our heyday, we had a couple companies we played for, and mostly because of our connections, our buddies worked there, and that's how that happened. So I share this story because everywhere you go as a new band, people are going to tell you how much money you should be making. People are going to flex on you about what they had achieved for a moment, and you won't know how to answer that, and you'll be caught up in this WTF of, am I doing it wrong? Have I undersold myself? What is my value? What's happening? How do we measure this? How much should I really be getting paid? Yada, yada, yada. So what I want to visit in this episode is, what is the standard for pay? How should we approach this? And honestly, this is going to break your heart, but there is no standard of pay, unfortunately. Nobody knows, and it is subjective. Truly, you are in and will be gigging in a very subjective medium for both yourself and everyone around you. On one hand, yes, music is an art. Yes, it is subjective. On the other hand, the supply and demand of your local area as per what businesses are willing to shell out as a guarantee, or what your draw might be, or what the strings attached are, right? We're going to get into all these details, but it's not obvious what you should be making. And every touring band that we know makes quote unquote a lot of money is also on some sort of subjective scale, depending on who booked them, how well they're doing, how big the crowd is, what venue they're at, all these different things. Do they have some sort of government grant behind them? Up here in Canada, that's pretty normal. Touring bands will be getting paid by a huge amount of money coming from the government at times. It sounds weird if you're listening to this from anywhere else, but that's part of our model here. We're very locked in with the government in most things, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how that's manifesting for you and where your values lie. But so yeah, there's this subjective approach to what we should be making. It's for you to evaluate what I'm about to present to you in your own community and to forge your own path. This is both a disappointment, but also a moment of excitement, because you can set your own standard once you've achieved at a certain level of performance or certain package or certain, show that you can bring to venues or beyond. All right, I'm going to present a few tools, if you will, of how to evaluate what type of money we should be making while playing music. So the main ones would be the size of the crowd, the type of venue, your draw or the event draw, time spent. So this is what you think you're valued at because you put X amount of hours into your trade, into the project. And then things like sponsorship and other strings attached. It's also important to mention that fundamentally as a startup band, you're probably going to be looking at two types of pay in any venue or an event you're doing, or whatever this is, whatever the stage is. There's going to be two sort of, I guess actually there's three ways that you can get paid. So the number one would be a guarantee. And so if you are in the opportunity to receive a guarantee from a venue or an event, how much of a guarantee should we present, right? What are we worth? That's a huge question mark in the early days. Secondly would be, what is your draw, right? Because you're going to be paid by the tickets or by the door, right? So pre-sale tickets or by people showing up legitimately at the show. And then it's a matter of drawing as many people as possible. And what is the hype around your band? What are the strings attached to all that allowed for a successful night of X amount of people showing up? And then the third model, which is by far the most brutal, is like a pay-to-play model. These things do happen in what I would say like the scammy side of the music scene and or industry. They happen at the lowest level and the highest level. Sometimes this happens through a venue tricking you into taking tickets, and whatever you don't sell, you might owe back to the venue. I've seen that happen before. It might be legitimately like, oh, you want to play here, you have to pay us X amount of dollars, and then we encourage you to invite all your friends and make your money back, basically. That's becoming pretty popular apparently in certain cities, which is unfortunate. And I've also experienced around certain types of music festivals or competitions where it really depends, like the audition piece really depends on how many people simply just show up. So they're really just trying to farm popularity. They don't really care about talent, and that's the truth. So, this has happened multiple times in Calgary where these like touring competitions, they're just essentially a massive scam. They come to your city, they hype you up on these judges, they hype you up on an opportunity. The actual like end result for one band might be legit, but for 99% of the other bands involved, it's just a sham. It's just a hype train, and they're trying to make money off of locals showing up for this hyped situation, yeah, and then the winning band gets one song on the radio or gets some sort of prize that may or may not be worth it, but it's like there's casualties of war. The bodies are piling up around this thing like crazy. So yeah, I would say, if you take yourself seriously, I would avoid those things altogether. Don't put yourself through the disappointment. Don't put yourself through the emotional WTF of pay-to-play situations. There is value in art. You should be getting paid either by a guarantee, or you should be getting paid by the efforts of your popularity for you, not for like a mechanism or a system or some sort of weird, like lending your draw and your crowd and your value to some sort of award situation. That's silly. That's a bad trade, in my opinion. The longevity of your performance and your fan base and your friends and your community showing up is what's most important. And so this is the fundamental starting place for this whole idea of making money, is that we want to create longevity in our scene. You're going to hear me say this over and over and over again. This is the biggest piece of the mentality. Like the old dogs in my story, that is a true story. Honestly, I tap these old guys the second time around, different two dudes. It's funny. It's an archetype. It's like those two dudes who sit in the Muppets, right? Right? But like these dudes are at every bar you ever go to, and they've all played in a band, and they'll all tell you about all the money they used to make. And honestly, it's like it's always a flash in the pan, and it was always very circumstantial or very subjective to this moment in time. Our band has held relationships with multiple companies for now like 8 years and ongoing. And even playing with the Calgary Flames and playing with the high-level sporting community, we are on their payroll as contractors. We have kept that train going, and it's all due to, you know, a high value in customer service, a high value in retaining, being first and foremost being a member of our community, and then retaining our kind of customers, if you will. Like, but it's beyond that because we get to know these people. You know, you've heard me in other podcasts talk about the Calgary Stampede. Like, we play a number of corporate shows for these companies that really enjoy those times, and you meet the CEO right there of the company. We're talking huge operations here. We're talking, you know, $1 million events that are going down, literally. Like, we've played for multi-million-dollar events, and we have, you know, literally shook the hands of billionaires and multimillionaires, and these people just love music and they want to vibe. And, you know, you're not flexing in the moment. You just say, hey, that was awesome, thank you so much. You just leave it. But yeah, they come back around and you keep the energy going. At that level, we're booking through an event person anyway, so what does it matter to talk to the owner? It's just about creating a moment of connection. But yeah, so, you know, these booking agencies, these people that work with us, they kept us going. And so that's the mentality. And that's the same mentality you're going to have with your draw, with your community. So whether it's by guarantee or by creating a draw and having people show up at your show, this would be a touring experience as well as like a record label, or as the marketing machine is really putting you on the right bill as an opener, eventually a headliner, but you're creating this momentum, you're creating this hype. People are listening to your music, they love your music, the product is fundamentally already there. And so number one, our music is amazing. People are loving it. We have this niche market or a wide range market, doesn't matter. But, you know, we fundamentally have a great product and we are artistically set up for success. So now we're moving this forward and we're wanting to create community together. You'll remember being at your favorite touring band's concert and they made you feel like you're a part of what they are doing. You and the entire crowd. It's kind of like a family, right? And then you add on to that all the feel-good moments and certain elements like intoxication or whatever, right? And all of a sudden the whole thing is just a beautiful crescendo altogether. And so we want to capture that to a point at the local level as well. And that's going to drive our success and the money that we make. So let's start by talking about our draw and that community that we have. And I'm going to mention this in the podcast about the venues and how we approach our gigging experience. A lot of this is also wrapped up in the type of quote-unquote show we're producing. And so, you know, there can be more elements to your performance than just the music. You could legitimately go on with a light show. You could go in with different acts supporting. You could work with like with drag. You could work with burlesque. You could work with dancers. Like, there's so much that you can kind of pair with your situation. And obviously the most common is pairing with other bands. And so this would be very common in most genres of music, where you find 1, 2, 3, 4 other bands that are similar to your band, that share a vibe, that share values, and you build bills together. This would be super common in like the punk world. It's also super common in like the folk world, the country world. It's just common everywhere. But, you know, if you can latch on to 2 or 3 bands you can create a show with, or you create a show like with a group of other artists, you know, maybe there's visual elements to it, whatever. I've seen this manifest in the local scene over and over and over again. And so it might be, yeah, again, people wanted to curate a really cool event where there's visual effects and other things. On the other hand, it's 2 or 3 bands getting together to curate a wonderful moment where these bands are similar and they kind of vibe together, and it makes people's while more worth their while. And so the consistency of creating that show at different venues and you know, bringing things like a single release, an EP release, an album release, and keeping those elements of your hype going. I'll talk to these things in more depth in other lessons as well, but as we keep that going and we're watching the crowds draw to us and people appreciate us, and if we can keep that for a year or more, you'll see your crowds growing. And so as the crowds grow and as the value of your product goes, and as you continue to add other elements that make it special and make it worthwhile, you can, you know, start low and grow. So that's number one, start low and grow. And, you know, $10 at the door, 3 bands, 150 person venue, you know, 60 people showed up. It's your first gig. or whatever, right? With these people, you know you're good, you know you've got a great product, you know people listen to it, your friends tell you, your family tells you. Randoms at work are like, hey man, great music. It's like, yeah, we'll show up. Okay, well, they didn't this time, but eventually they will, and maybe they show up again. And hey, we're doing that same thing down at this venue this month, and it's going to be really cool because we have this drink special happening and blah, 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 or it's just a rad venue, right? There's all these different elements. And so that's the other thing about like a very successful show is that the pie chart of pieces that made it successful isn't just a venue and a band. It's not a 2-piece pizza. It might be an 8-piece pizza. You know, the venue and the bands are the biggest pieces of that pie chart usually, but it could be a number of things. It could be the time of the month. You know, it could be the price point. It could be if there were drink specials. It could be if there was some sort of other thing happening in the city at that time where people are just kind of out and about. It could be that, right? There's so much about it. A certain person was there at the venue, a featured bartender as an example, or like whatever. There's so many different pieces to this that can allow for one night to pop off where another night didn't. But the idea is that at least with your music, you're creating consistency and that you're creating more reasons for people to come, like always adding new songs. It doesn't hurt to always say, hey, we're going to play this new original or this thing's going to happen, or right. And so you're kind of building that momentum as you go from show to show and as you're creating value in your draw. And now, you know, obviously there's other mechanisms, and I will talk about this in other podcasts as well, but things like the social media following, things like your, you know, off stage engagements, whatever that might be, selling tickets, having an email list, but you're going to create a following on some sort of off stage, you know, mechanism. And that's what you want to kind of lean into. It's good to have all of them and then to see what's working well and kind of lean that way. And of course you're posting or whatever might be archetypal. I don't want to talk too much about the marketing piece in this one because these are other aspects of other podcasts that I'll be speaking to, but that is a part of how you're going to be reflecting your value against your draw and creating, you know, your value for ticket sales and whatnot. So just to reiterate, the fundamental ingredients to creating a draw and to creating your value in your draw and in your following is, number one, a great product. This is why I started with the artists and the music as the first 2 episodes of this podcast series. Get a good product. The product derives from the people in your band, right? Like music personified, and then how you're writing that music together. That's super, super important. Have a great product or have a niche for yourself. Understand yourself, show that to the world. Like, be the authentic thing you need to be and let people fall in love with that. Yeah, so that's quality of product and consistency, starting low in the scene, some trial and error, building momentum through a gig, creating a show, creating a sound, thinking about those elements and how you can make this better, giving people a reason to show up month after month. And then, yeah, start low and grow. You know, a little bit of trial and error with your ticket sales, with your draw, and keep that going. That way you will find value and you will create value in your product. Now I want to revisit these tools that I had mentioned earlier, because the tools for measuring value, or, you know, what is owed to you from the monetary side of things, makes more sense when you're going to be paid a guarantee. Now, between draw and guarantee, obviously the draw is better if you have a great following. Believe it or not a lot of local bands have a great draw. Believe it or not, the pie chart of reasons why people show up to shows, one band's draw is usually a smaller piece, 9 times out of 10. You will have 1 or 2 bands in your community that sort of like have a draw, and that's like, oh my God, that's amazing, we want to be just like them. But most bands won't have a strong or consistent draw. They need 8 or 9 pieces to a pie chart to keep people showing up, you know? And so you're just working through those rhythms. If you start to create a real draw and you have real hype and real fans and people are showing up, leverage that. That's when we need to start considering like potentially a record label, potentially a tour deal, because we believe that will translate past our local community into something way bigger, way more glorious. So I'm going to speak to that in other episodes as well. But if you have a real draw manifesting and you're caught up in this, that's awesome. Like, we need to harness that energy, and we need to take that beyond the ripple effect of our local community. That needs to ripple out statewide, provincial wide, whatever, nationally, whatever. We need to see how far that ripple can go, and how far you can ride that wave, basically. So back to the other idea, though, that 9 times out of 10, it's maybe better to get a guarantee. How do we measure the guarantee? It's like, is it $100 per member or whatever? Like, what is this thing at a lower level, at a higher level? What is it? So let me go back to this list that I mentioned earlier, these tools to measure value or to suggest pay, and then I'm going to talk about each and every one. So right away, we're looking at the size of the crowd, the type of venue, your draw, which I already spoke about at length, time spent, sponsorship. So there will be a time where a promoter or a booking agency or some sort of event person or whatever will come to you, and it could be a festival as an example. These are popular for bands that are very much in the indie world, is that these individuals will come to you and they'll offer you a certain amount of money for a gig. And honestly, if you're brand new, just take the money. It won't hurt just to, like, a lot of these micro festivals, they don't pay a lot per band. They might only pay like couple hundred bucks per band. So it's like, you go and you play your half an hour set, you play your 45-minute set. They have a back line, so it was painless. Hopefully they have a back line, and you're just like, yep, $50 each with a tab, a couple beers and a burger. We're good to go. And you ride the hype train of playing with like all these other bigger bands that were later in the night, yada, yada, yada. So these micro festivals are happening all the time. They don't pay a lot. Just go with it. But if you ever come to the place where all of a sudden now it's a little bit more open-ended and they want to find out how much do you cost for a day, there's some fundamental things you can ask. So what is the venue? What's the size of the crowd? Honestly, it doesn't hurt to ask what the budget is. I do this all the time. There's this hilarious stigma that exists that you have to like lead with your value and just be like, we charge $4,000 a show, and it's just like, okay, fair enough. Or you could straight up ask, these places will be working in a real budget. This is pretty like, business standard. They'll have a preconceived idea of what you will hopefully charge, or what they're hoping you will present. And, if they're a reputable business, they will have a decent margin there for you to work within. And then you can see if that's worth your time or not. From my experience, as I've made with my group a lot of money in these types of, guaranteed environments, and sometimes less money, we usually will lean towards what we feel like our value is. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but we lean with what we know we've made in the past and where we are comfortable accepting for the amount of work we're willing to put in and for the type of show we perform to create that consistency so that we have that reputation. But we're also willing to go a little lower too. So this leads me to my other fundamental sort of starting place for working with the guarantee is that, in my opinion, it's better to play than to say no because of money. And you want to create consistency. It depends. So I'll give you an example of like our wedding portfolio as an example. A lot of bands don't play weddings, so you might not care to hear this, but we have one rate for weddings. We don't package it out. We don't scale it out. We have one rate. Why? Because we have been in rooms. I personally have been in a room with my friends where we have played for multiple people's weddings. Like, super coincidentally, people showed up at our gigs. And I have heard that people talk about how much we charge to learn. Oh, you had the Frontiers? So did we. Da, da, da. Sometimes this comes up, right? Oh, you had that contract. You had that vendor at your weddings. How much did they charge you? So we learned that people have been asking how much we charge. And so thank God we've been consistent the whole time, but we set that sort of industry standard for ourselves. We literally played hundreds of weddings. And people know if you book the Frontiers, here's what you're going to get, here's what they do, and here's how this goes down at a wedding. So the same is in a festival circuit, the same is with booking agencies, the same is with venues where, you might be hired for a night to just play for 3 hours for the room or whatever, but you do want that consistency, but the consistency can also be within the margins. So that, and within those margins it's more important to play your music. It's always more important to be on a stage. If you do get in any type of environment where there are other important people coming to your show, be it companies, be it booking agencies, booking whatever. Like, you never know who's in the crowd. So take the gig. It's okay to have sort of a bandwidth of pay. And I mean, if it's really low and it's really truly not worth your time, then the gig's probably going to be crap. So that's where you're just like, hey, we can let that one go. There's always going to be better opportunities down the road. But if it is a really cool opportunity and they're just a little lower on the pay side, then, work within that. Try to leverage something else for the green room, or some sort of what your rider is, maybe other perks you can have there. Hey y'all, it's Drew here from Post Production, and I just wanted to butt in here to suggest that obviously you can grow your guarantee from year to year, and I would use the previous gigs as a reference point to how you can marginally grow that, especially as you get better. So add more robust elements to your performance set, keep growing your portfolio, keep growing your guarantee, and as we start low and grow, we keep progressing in our value. What you'll start to learn through doing this multiple times in whatever environment it is, be it with booking agencies, to venues, to companies, to whatever, as you start talking to people who book bands, and as you start getting more out there around a guarantee, you'll learn there is a bit of an industry standard, right? And I'm not sure what the industry standard is for your environment. Where I'm at right now in Calgary, when it comes to guarantees and whatnot, we actually have what I would say is a pretty high standard. You can be paid hundreds of dollars a night per member of a band with a guarantee. It's pretty nice. So we are like the Nashville North, right? We're a Canadian version of Nashville. We have a great booking environment here. I mean, that's not a true representation, because at Nashville you're often paid, like let's say on a residency, not by the house but by the covers you do. People pay you. There's a different culture there around tipping, as an example. But up here in Calgary, where I'm at, our corporate environment shells out, which is really cool. So that might not be the same for you. You might be able to map out the venues in your area on a scale. The venues themselves might have a great draw. There's all these different things that you can evaluate to say, hey, here's where our expectations are at. Here's what we can hope to make. And as long as the people in your band love playing music, the money should kind of come second to that. So lead with the love of music. Be open to learning the nuances of your scene, of your business community, of whatever this might look like, and start to create your margins around what you think your value is worth. A business model for any startup, and this would go for like literally any type of business, is to undercut the market. So once you've made that evaluation, if you really want in quickly, you can undercut the market. It's a bit of a tight rock. Like I would suggest you could do this for a season, but learn as you get better and more noted to how do we get up to kind of industry standard, and then past that as well. So it can be tedious to grow out of an undercutted situation. You might never be able to grow out of an undercutted situation with a certain venue or promoter or booking agency or company, because that's just where they want to keep you. But as you come around to it, and as you create new relationships, you can start to raise your prices and set a new standard. And of course, again, as the draw starts to happen as well, depending on what that looks like, you can start to leverage things like what are the margins of the night. That's one thing I should mention here, is that if you do have a good draw, there's other ways to make money. It doesn't have to be on ticket sales. You could say, hey, we know 100 people are showing up, and we know our crowd drinks like crazy. The guest check average of the bar of the venue is going to be very high. So we straight up want a guarantee, or we want a percentage of sales that night, or we want our guarantee to reflect on the percentage of sales that night. And then the house is like, fine, we're keeping the ticket sales. You're like, that's fine. You guys charge the tickets. Here's what we don't want to make them out of control. So let us know what you're going to charge, but we want a percentage of what is of your margins for that night. And that's not a bad model either, because that might be way more than ticket sales. It might be way more than what a guarantee would be. And that's a really nice symbiotic relationship. And if you can kind of create those moments, you can kind of grow with the venue, really grow with the venue. And that would be really cool. Really grow with the booking agency, or however that looks like. If someone were to ask me, Drew, what is the best tool to evaluate pay? And I would honestly say the venue is the best ruler for how much you should fundamentally start to charge. The venue also speaks to capacity usually. It's not uncommon in a corporate setting, for the people to say, hey, it's a company of 1,000 people, we're doing it in this venue, yada, yada. But the difference between like an outdoor venue against like a casino, against like a high level resort area, like we learned in our booking portfolio, and this is the same for the agencies. We have 3 agencies that book us. I don't care how many people are at the thing. I actually look more at the venue. The venue shows the price point for what this thing's going to be. It actually gives you, the right idea of what the stage is, what the lighting situation is, everything there. So the best tool to evaluate what you should charge for a guarantee is the venue. That is your bread and butter litmus test. And some cities have, like I mentioned in the music podcast, some venues have entry level venues. Other ones have you're not playing here unless you're very, very legit. And once you get up there, you can ask around, again, ask questions, talk to people that have played there before, learn what those margins are, learn what the industry standard is, but let the venue be your true ruler or litmus test for how much you should be charging. And honestly, I made fun of the old dogs in the early part of the podcast, but those are good conversations to have, because you start to learn these subjective ideas around what was real for you. If it's a flash in the pan for 2 years, can we extend that? Could I get what they were talking about to 4 or 5 years? What does this look like? Were they just a cash grab? A lot of bands will do that. It's just a cash grab. And we're alcoholics, literally, or we're drug addicts, and we're going in and we're just making money, and we're drug, sex, rock and roll, cash grab. These people will be all around you in the scene. I know that sounds like a little bit, a little bit derogatory or whatever, but that's true. So be weary of the cash grabbing addict who's all around you, the quote unquote rock star who really doesn't care, and he's going to be one member of a band, or he'll be an entire band. And these dudes are kind of, they're not good. They're like poison. So be aware of that, though, that some people will just say, screw it, I'm going to try to get I'm going to squeeze this thing one time and get as much as I can out of it. And then they come back and they boast and they slam dunk on you and they flex all over you, and it's slimy, man. So stay away from that dude. Let him burn all of his bridges and fizzle out. But yeah, don't be about the cash grab, but try to learn, talk to people, have a bit of discernment about it, get a wider sort of sample size of what's been the norm, and lead that way. Let the venue be your ruler for how much you charge. Okay, so to talk about the next tool, which would be our own value, or what we think or perceive is the value of our work going into the project so far. And so right now, I'm on Instagram a lot. I'm kind of keeping up with the internet vibe. And there's this whole situation happening with people where they're like, know your worth, know your value, manifest your destiny, do all these things. And in my opinion, the people that have manifested their destiny the best, so let's take a very acute and obvious example, and 2 people who actually preached this gospel were Jim Carrey and Oprah Winfrey. But you know who Jim Carrey and Oprah Winfrey had in common? They were the best, period. Jim Carrey might have been the most ridiculous, comedian actor of all time. And Oprah Winfrey found herself in an amazing niche. She was an amazing speaker. Her show was outstanding. And so, of course, these people manifested their destiny. Of course, this is where a lot of this ideology derives from. And you're going to hear about this a lot in the creative world. You're going to hear a lot in the artistic world. Know your value. Lead with your value. But in my opinion, this is pretty weak. Unless you are insanely and obviously super talented and valued in your community immediately, you have to learn. You have to go the way of trial and error. You have to present something and let it be accepted by your community. Both ways you have to, no matter what. You won't even know you're the best until you get up on the stage and realize, oh my God, I guess I do have something here, right? And so we do want to be surprised by that. We want to set ourselves up in our mentality to allow for, surprise and the nuances of discovery to affect the way that we move through our community and take on opportunity. We don't want to believe or be an egomaniac. We don't want to believe we're the best immediately. We want to let the crowds and let the community represent that to us. So I don't put a lot of value in believing I'm something I'm not. I don't put a lot of value in putting 300 hours into a project that might ultimately just suck. And I'm sorry, you're going to hear it here first. I don't care who you think you are or what you think you can do until that has been reflected against a real measuring tool, which in the live performance environment is the music, is the crowd, is everything that's wrapped up in it, everything we've talked about today that goes along with the draw. So that might be different than a recording situation. You might put out the most amazing, subjective, artistic, and, personally, authentically rich piece of music that hits the airwaves and everyone's loving it, right? Maybe that doesn't even translate to the stage. So if your hook and your value is in things off the stage, by all means, go for it. Stay off the stage. But when it comes to being on the stage, your value is in how the community responds to you. I personally live and die on the stage. My value is how I watch that room move. We can go into a cold space and there will be people in the room. Guaranteed we will get them dancing. We will get them singing. We have cultivated that energy. We've cultivated that expression, and that's my value to the room. And that has nothing to do with the hundreds of hours I did off the stage. For me and my group, we learned that on the stage. That's our value. Now I can flex. Now I know what that's worth. Now I understand where I can start to create those margins of my value and how much we get paid. And the last tool that we can use for measuring how much we get paid is something like sponsorship. And I'm listing this in the podcast because it's something worth talking about, but for most startups, and I'm guessing for most people listening to this podcast, this is maybe never going to happen to you, or it's something that's so far down the road that you kind of don't have to worry about it, but I do want to touch on it. So my band holds an endorsement with a pretty large local brewery. It's the biggest one in the area. And they have shelled out thousands of dollars for us, both in a gigging portfolio, but in a creative portfolio. And so if you can latch on to a symbiotic relationship with a local company, something that goes beyond like an online moment, like if you can really get them to basically sponsor you, create synergy between your brands, create events together. Usually these things start at an event or two, and then it goes past that because there is a hook around the image, the sound, the recorded music, right? You could write a song for a company, whatever. There's lots there that you can discover depending on what they would like to do. But if there is a true fit with a band and the music and a business, then I would suggest try to learn the nuances of how far that can go. And if they can pay you to be places, because that might be in their budget, you're sort of their NASCAR, so to speak. They slap a logo on you. It's actually kind of fun. It sounds cringe and douche, but it's not. It's fun to wear a logo and to get out there. Every once in a while, you might be seen as a sellout. Fair enough. All the indie kids will be like, oh, sellouts. But it's like, well, whatever, bro. We're making money and we're going places we never would have otherwise. So it's worth taking a shot at. It's worth considering. Obviously, music and beer are really symbiotic. So something like a brewery makes a lot of sense. And, if you can find a way for them to pay for you to be at places, that is awesome. I know it can work, but you do have to discover it. It takes usually like some relationships and that really entrepreneurial networking ability to pull that off. On the other hand, and this is a little more common, you might find yourself playing at a festival or for a one-off show, or working with a series of gigs, like a touring situation where there is a legit sponsor behind it. It's usually a beer company. It's usually for logo rights. It can be banks. It can be other things. I've seen that lots of festivals up here in these parts where a bank gets behind something. These organizations, put money aside for this. It's usually some sort of write-off, or there's other reasons why they do that, if only to market and to get their brand out there. But regardless, this means that the event, the pockets of the event are being lined with the sponsorship. And sometimes that is going directly to the band pay. Sometimes it's going to other nuances. But, when we look at what the ticket sales are, we look at what the guarantee might be, we look at however things are getting paid and there's a sponsor involved, it's good to know that so that you can lean a bit higher, or you can reference that in an inquiry or in an email, right? You might be able to lean at the higher point of your margin of what you know you're worth to say, we're going to look for this, and is there sponsorship money here? Are you guys comfortable if we lean this way? This is what we bring. We know this is going to be awesome. Okay, we're at the part of the episode where I can get out of the subjectivity, be a little less vague, and really get into the practicalities. And so it's this point in the episode where I want to talk about when we get the money, what are we doing with it? And this is kind of exciting. So let's start right from the very beginning. If you're a startup band or it's a new project and you have some goals to record, you have some goals to get merch, you have some goals to use your money specifically for the project, I would suggest you put like all of the money back into the project, right? Like, you're going to be making a few $100 here, a few $100 there. I'll talk about it more in the venue piece, but we're looking to be gigging probably once a month, at least seasonally. We might learn that we can pick up more gigs in a private environment, more than once a month, but these are things I'm going to talk through on the venue episode, just to learn like what is the nice balance to gigging, how do we keep the draw coming when we have it, this and that. So there is a sweet spot there that we can find, and when you're in your sweet spot, if you have the ability to reallocate most of your funds to the project, I would say do that in the early days. There are other mechanisms you can use, like GoFundMe or things similar where people can give you money, where you can fundraise a little bit. To me, this is a little desperate. I've never used those mechanisms. We've always had the project pay for itself. It's been a real moment of art creating art and art funding art, and responsibly allocating our funds and our efforts with a goal in mind to do that. Where this option becomes quite nuanced is usually with member turnover. So, everyone's going to have a lot of sweat equity, so to speak, in the early parts of their band. You're putting in a lot of work for really no monetary gain. And sweat equity in a hobby is, that's really all you have. You're like, man, I put in all this time. We're lugging gear, we're lugging sound equipment, we're renting stuff out of pocket. It comes back to us maybe on the pay with the band. Like, there's so much happening where you're just kind of quote unquote in the hole. When we really want to look at it, it's like, dude, it's red everywhere. We got to climb out of a massive hole, but we're just having fun. It's just a hobby. We've all got day jobs, or there's these other things happening for us, and we're just having fun with it. So, if you have a great relationship with the people in your band, if people bow out for a season and they're okay to release their portions of the funds into the band to help the project, that's great. I've had that experience with most previous members in our situation, but every once in a while, people are like, hey man, I just put 6 months in. I know we're going to be recording at the end of the year, but I need my cut now. I need to walk away with, my share of what I did. And so when other members see that happening, or when a new member comes in and now has to sort of backfill this equity, it can get a little weird. We have always looked at our projects at the early part of our group as very seasonal. We give very specific short-term goals to what we're going to do with our money. We didn't go into a high-level album recording session right off the bat. We always leverage live albums, singles, these types of things to really keep the ball rolling, right? So you can pay a couple $1,000s in a studio to at least get the ball rolling on a single. You might be able to do an EP or a really, really good demo in a basement studio or with a buddy, right? So as a true startup, or as a true sort of shifting gears project, look for those nuances. I would move away from these heavy duty projects where there could be member turnover in the midst of it, and it creates nuances around how the band is saving money together. But fundamentally, the option of putting money towards the project for your first year or two is super ideal. So you will raise your gigging portfolio to the point where there could be hundreds of dollars per member per night, or when the members of the band are in it long enough that they just need to use the money. There's going to come a point where, right, it's like, man, whatever money we make, I need to use it now. I need to put that towards my own savings, my own project on the side, or whatever that is. So when that starts to happen, you've got a couple options even in that context. So what's common is, let's say you're in a 4-person band. What's common is that the band becomes the 5th member. So there's always funds allocated to the band, and that thing by the end of the year has been generating X amount of dollars that are similar to the members, and you can then choose as a group where to spend that. Maybe that's most obviously goes to merch, so that 5th member, the band itself, that entity starts to drive its own income, and you use the band as its own entity to backfill on income, and it's self-generating for y'all. There could be other income streams, like things that are online or whatnot too, that the band can self-generate that way, right? The music online might be that way. The sponsorship, if you guys have it, might be that way. Royalties or publishing for your music might be that way. And what do we want to do with the self-generating band income that comes in? And obviously that thing should be positioned back into the band. This is just like a startup business, guys. Like, we're putting most of our money back into the project, back into the entity that it creates, until we're making way, way, way more money, and those margins start to grow, and we can create a complexity, and we can scale out the way that we're making this money, right? So wealth comes from scalability, whereas just making ends meet comes from like a one-to-one sort of exchange of value to income. But yeah, if you can figure out a way to scale out your band and the income, this would be more on the lines of publishing and royalties. That's amazing. That's where true wealth comes from. None of us will hit that in our lifetime, usually, in terms of a local or startup gigging portfolio. But we want to be able to position whatever income's coming in for the entity so that it is self-generating. If we are to the point where the project can make enough money that we're shelling out to members pretty regularly, and we're comfortable doing that, what I would suggest you do, and this is sort of Drew's, my best suggestion, this is just from my perspective, is that we're going to be making X thousands of dollars per gig over the next 6 months. So I would actually say budget out what that next project's going to take. And using my band as a reference, we're not putting 20 grand into albums. To do a good album, if you're listening to this and you don't know, 20 grand is sort of the starting place for a good album. And so that's a lot of money. So we're looking at singles, we're looking at creative videos, we're looking at music videos, we're looking at photo shoots, we're looking at little, marketing things that we can use on the socials. So it's working with local creatives. It's working with, 3.5 minute songs, maybe 2 or 3 of those, maybe an EP, right? And so we're building out our portfolio that way until something like a record deal can land, until we can really start to leverage a greater portion of our portfolio. But I would say look at your gigging portfolio over the next couple months and allocate funds from very specific gigs or a very specific season to a band project. Set your goals that way. It's less aloof, it's less unknown. It's like we know exactly what we're working towards and what we're going to use those funds towards. And that's the way my band operates right now. It's like, hey boys, we're coming into this season. We have these 6 gigs lined up. Let's take the money from 2 of them and put it towards this project. Are we all okay with that? We will all be playing in the band at this time. We will all be in that creative moment together, the studio, the photo shoots, whatever it is, and let's move it that way. Or the merch, or setting these things up that way, right? It's let's use this energy together. Handshake, high five. This is going towards the project. Everyone's okay with that. And now we have a goal, and no muss, no fuss. We will arrive there. Everything around that or after that is now up for debate, and that's fine. But for that specific moment in time, the funds are going there. Okay, let's talk about how people should be getting paid in the band. So there's basically 2-ish ways you can do this. I'm going to summarize them into 2 ways that make the most sense for this podcast. And what the first way would be is, the front man or the identity of the band. This is usually when it's like Drew Jones and the Frontiers. So Drew Jones is doing all the work. Drew is booking everything. He's the face of the band. He's the name of the band. The band are their own kind of thing. Drew's fundamentally going in because of the bookings and because of all the admin and whatnot. He's taking a 10% or more cut per show. And then you're going to have like a superstar guitar player and a session drummer and all these people, and they all scale out as well. So the value of my band for an hour or more a night, depending on even what that looks like, is this guy costs this much, 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 and Drew takes 20% more, and he fundamentally costs this much. So guess what? To book Drew Jones and the Frontiers is going to cost $2,500 a night. That's just what we're looking for. That's where our value is, and that's where our reputation has us. And so this happens at the highest level usually. This is like Justin Bieber putting a retainer on his band, And this is usually the result of a fairly maturing gigging community where a solo individual who writes banging songs, who is just killing it in their own right, can then back hire like amazing session performing artists. So you might notice that if you go to some of the high-level local gigs in your community, that the backing band might be similar every time you go there. And so, the strength of the creative project is usually just with the front person. I've noticed this is pretty common in most major centers where, they're producing great, like high-level live bands. It's like the backing band may be similar from group to group. That being said, if you've all been growing together in your project and you're also arriving at a place where certain members do more work and fundamentally carry more of a load on or off stage, these are things that can be negotiated with members as well. And this can get tedious because, hey, we've got the same 4 homies that have been gigging for 6 years, and Johnny finds out that Jane gets paid more. And it's like, what? But it's like, yeah, sorry, Johnny, you didn't help with any of the admin. You just show up to plug in. Yeah, sure, you sing and play well, but it's like, come on, man. So those things need to be kind of dealt with. And because we're all artists and we're all prone to being crazy with our emotions and our expression, these things can flare up. So usually what you want is some transparency, some upfront conversations. You can honestly say, hey, Johnny, listen, I'm going to be paying Jane a little more just so we're all on the same level because she just does more work, man. So either pick it up and let's figure out how we can do that, or just be comfortable with that, and then does Johnny reinforce just to show up for the gig the same way he was, or how are we, right? Think about it at a management level. Like, how are we encouraging each other and the members of the band to up our ante together, right? And so this can all affect mentality, it can all affect pay, and the overall longevity of the band. The other option, it's the one that I would lean towards with a startup specifically, is to pay everyone equal and to expect that there's equal amounts of work around the stage. I think it's okay that whoever is doing the bookings and holding the administrative role of the band, which could also be the website, could be the posting, could be whatever. If you want to fundamentally say, hey, this person takes 10% more on bookings, and you can have that in your guarantee, you can have that in your perceived value for a draw generating night or a ticket night or whatever, that's totally fine. I think the 4 or 5 members of the band or whoever you guys are, you need to settle that together. You have to kind of shake hands on that verbal agreement. It's usually just a verbal agreement. And so at the end of the night, that person, just takes a little more, or maybe they never ever pay for a tab if there's an outstanding tab at a bar, or there's some sort of other agreement that you guys can come up with. But at the end of the day, I think it's fundamentally okay for your administrative person to take a little more, and then everyone else is basically split equally. But the time on stage is fundamentally equal for all members until we can hit the tipping point of paying that administrative person a little more, depending on what those margins look like. So I'm going to end this episode by telling you exactly what I do as the leader of my band, as the person who manages all of the logistics, who handles every single part of the conversation on and off stage. Obviously, the boys are awesome at shaking hands and making connections too, but I handle all the emailing, I handle all the logistics, I handle the website, the socials, everything. I run the entity of the band. I write all the songs. The boys help me flesh them out. It turns into something completely different once we're all in on that, and it's pure freedom and creativity together. But I'm bringing the scaffolding of everything our group is, but then we're running it through together on the stage, and we're creating moments of synergy in the studio. And yeah, but things start with me and they quickly branch out into duties on and off the stage for the other members. We do everything for equal share, period. We run a socialist empire, basically. And I believe in that. I believe that our expectation is everyone has pulls weight, pull weight, all for one for all. No joke, we help the drummer load in and out every night. We are first in, last out together. We have a high value in creating synergy on and off the stage. We want all of that synergy to manifest on the stage. The stage is sacred ground for us. The night is awesome. It's brotherly. It's family. It's connection. And yeah, I'm the front man. I have a guitar I usually lug in. My setup is maybe the easiest next to some of our other lead players. But we're all there for each other. We're all helping each other. It is a true all for one for all mentality, and we split pay. And so I'm doing all this administrative work on the side. And what I've always said to the band is, hey, boys, you play my songs. You're helping the project that I've created, which, side note, they all have a very strong identity in. We share the identity, but I have created this thing. And that's my payoff. My payoff is these amazing homies play my music, right? And I can take credit for that. It's in the writing credit. There's other writing credit in there as well as the boys come in. But to me, I put my head on the pillow knowing that at the night, and I sleep well knowing that I created this for this group, and my payoff is a little bit of an ego moment, but also just having the homies, be a part of this community together. And so I really value that. I love that. That's where I am. I don't actually care about the money as much. None of us have cared about the money. We've all had day jobs on the side. At times we've had members without day jobs. They're relying on the band and other things. So, it is nuanced with pressures of financial pressures as well. We understand that, but we responsively and very openly communicate together around this, and we hold the band in a high regard of community and collaboration. And I'm going to speak way more to this on the mentality episode. So if you're cherry picking on this, listen to the marketing side of it all, because there's lots to do with marketing around money and how you can generate more about that draw moment. And there's way more to do with this on the mentality side as well, which I can't wait for those episodes. They're really fun. It's chock full of sort of industry secrets and other really interesting nuances of the way that we've approached things and found success. But yeah, we're not egomaniacs. That's kind of what you're hearing probably through all these podcasts. We are just kind of set apart that way. We believe that everything we do is for the good of the music and for the good of the community and the good of each other. And part of that really is reflected in the way we take pay. And at the end of the day, when you build the portfolio together and you all hold responsibility on the momentum and on the identity, even with changing subbing members don't affect it. You're all getting paid the same cut, right? It's like, we bring in a sub, he's still making the same. Every once in a while, actually, we pay out to the original member off the back of the sub, and that's upfront. It's like, hey, you had to take the night off, but I'm actually allocating $100 to this guy because he put the work in leading up to it. You're going to get, your hundreds that will come to you on that night, but I'm actually saving 100 for the official member. Little things like that we do over time, but that's also on the record, and those are more of the nuances. But at the end of the day, it's all about collaboration for us and all about equality, and we have found a lot of success gigging and creating money that way together. It's specifically around this money stuff that I wish 20 years ago I could phone myself up today and say, hey Drew, you've been around the block 3 or 4 times. What do I do? Can you evaluate my band? Can we look at this together? Can I get a professional outsider's opinion, and can you help me with this? And you can by navigating to my website, www.thefrontiersteam.ca, where you can look into my mentorship program. And honestly, I only do 1 or 2 or 3 sessions at a pretty decent cost. This is not a cash cow for me. This is not a money grab. So, I'll keep you to 1 or 2 or 3 sessions where we can nail all the best stuff about your band. I can do the full evaluation that comes with your first session anyways. We can look at other things like assets, social media, website, all the other developmental pieces that you would need. So it is artist mentorship, it's artist development. As you're hearing in these podcasts, my passion stems from creating autonomy in local artists and really helping build the knowledge to lend to the experiences so that sustainability can happen. So let's get past the idea of needing a manager. Let's get past the idea of needing a booking agent at the lowest level, and let's do it ourselves. Let's learn these little tricks and tips, and let's just put it into motion so that we can rock and roll to infinity and beyond. Looking forward to seeing you on the website and in the next episode.
I got a paycheck in my pocket, baby. Clocking out of work for the week. I got my daddy's old truck with the trailer hooked up. No place that I gotta be except the riverside, sitting with a cooler full of ice. Got my feet down in the water and my head up in the sky. There's only one thing I'm trying to catch on my line, and it's a good time, a good time. Trying to catch a good time, a good time. Got my eyes on the prize now, heading out where I can breathe, yeah. I got a couple good friends who gonna pop some cans in a lawn chair right next to me. In the riverside, sitting with a cooler full of ice. Got my feet down in the water and my head up in the sky. There's only one thing I'm trying to catch on my line, and it's a good time, a good time. Trying to catch a good time, a good time. When the summer hits, baby, there's only one place I wanna be. It's with you acting lazy, so come on, sit down right next to me. By the riverside, sitting with a cooler full of ice. Got my feet down in the water and my head